I want to go to Beirut. And so it was 1978, 77, 78 when I got that job with Associated Press. And I had just gotten divorced from my first wife. And that was kind of a crazy time. It was very difficult for both of us. But I had always kind of regretted that I had not gone to Vietnam. And the reason I didn't go is because, Nixon had a lottery where they pulled names out of the hat, and if your number was not good, you probably were going to Vietnam. My number ended up being 166, and the cutoff was 145, so I didn't have to go to Vietnam. But I always regretted missing out on seeing a war. We read about wars, we read about history, we know somehow they're madness, but they happen, and they happen a lot, and obviously we've been living with them all our lives. So I got it in my head, I wanted to see a war, and if you work for AB, you can do that. So I studied Arabic and said I want to go to Beirut. And throughout my life, I've kind of taken risks, and I don't know, just an instinct for it. And over the years, I've come to realize that I don't think anything really good happens unless you take a risk. You kind of stick your neck out a little. And talking about being fearless, I'm not fearless. I was scared shitless through much of my time in the Middle East. And I think anyone who tells you they weren't is kidding themselves. But I tend to get in situations where I overreach and, kind of end up thinking, now, why did I want to do this? How did I get myself into this? But somehow, eventually, it kind of works itself out, and you realize you've achieved something that maybe you didn't realize you could do. So that's kind of a roundabout answer to why did you go to Beirut?
It was a good answer, and I guess the corollary question is, with the successful time that you spent in the Middle East, what was the connection between coming back? Tell us about how you made the decision to start the brewery and your mindset thereof.
Well, many of you probably know that, so the woman I got divorced from, I told you about in the beginning, I remarried in Beirut. She came to visit me in Beirut, and she got pregnant, and we decided to get back together. So we got remarried in the Middle East, and she was with me through much of the almost 6 years that I was in the Middle East. And AP wanted me to go to the Philippines next because President Marcos was having a lot of trouble there. And I was very excited about that. And Ellen, my second wife, also my first wife, said, no way I'm going to the Philippines with these children. I'm going home, and I hope you come with me. And, so I kind of looked into my soul and realized I didn't want to screw this up again. And so we came back to New York. And it was a big come down for me because, my career was totally focused on covering conflicts and that sort of thing. So I came back, I went to work for a newspaper, and it was boring as hell. I was an editor. Most exciting part of the day was me arguing with a bunch of other editors about whose story got to be on the front page. And I just looked at these people and thought, I can't do this. I'm going to die if I have to do this the rest of my life. And I got interested in making beer when I was in the Middle East. I met homebrewers, guys who lived in Saudi Arabia where they had Islamic law. So I started making beer at home. And I started reading about these small breweries starting up. And I had always wanted to start a business. I had no business background, but I thought I knew how to sell things. When I was a kid, I won a lot of contests selling things. So that was really the foundation for wanting to start a brewery here in Brooklyn, in New York City. And you probably know I connected with my neighbor in Brooklyn, Tom Potter, who was a young guy with an MBA, and that was kind of the beginnings of Brooklyn Brewery. It was really, it saved me from a life of boredom working for a newspaper. And actually, if you know anything about what's happened in newspapers, in the meantime, it was a really good move at a perfect time.
Oh, there's a question. Chef?
Steve, did you ever consider being the original brewmaster of Brooklyn Brewery at any point in the beginning?
Question is, did I ever consider being the brewmaster? You know, I made beer at home, but originally we thought we were going to build a little brewery and start making beer and selling beer. But we had this neighbor, a woman entrepreneur, who told us that the key to this kind of business is distribution, and we should distribute our own beer. So we changed our idea to brewing a beer upstate in Utica, in a fairly big brewery. And I had no experience making beer in a really big brewery. So we hired a fourth-generation German-American brewer to be our first brewmaster, because he had experience brewing in a big brewery like that. So, you know, from that, once we made that decision, it kind of took me out of the actual beer brewing role. And we, you know, hired a really good guy to do that, and eventually Garrett replaced that guy. And you know, that's worked out really great.
So whether it was the Middle East or whether it was starting a brewery, there had to be moments, there has to be a few moments in your mind that were the oh shit moments where you were like, what have I got myself into? What were they, and then what did you do to get past them?
The oh shit moments lasted about 15 years. Tell you the truth. It was really tough selling beer in 1988 in Brooklyn. No one knew what craft beer was. You know, it was surprisingly expensive to a lot of people. It was dark, it was bitter. You know, the only people who really connected with it were bars and stores that sold imported beer. So they knew that there were some people out there who were interested in flavorful beer. And, you know, but those kind of customers were few and far between. Rich Novak sitting back there, he can confirm what I'm saying. And, you know, going out selling beer anywhere is tough. I think it's particularly tough in New York City because, you know, we've got some really sadistic customers here in New York who love to torture salespeople. And in the beginning, I think it took like 7 visits to open up an account, and we probably opened up 1 out of 20 accounts. We didn't really know what we were doing, so we were trying to sell beer all over Brooklyn. You know, we felt that everyone in Brooklyn should enjoy this beer. So we were selling beer out in Brownsville and East New York and Marine Park and all over the place. And eventually we kind of realized that the only place that it really caught on was, you know, kind of Park Slope, Brooklyn Heights, Fort Greene. We learned that there were areas where people appreciated what we're doing. Not a lot of people, but some people did. And so eventually we kind of narrowed our focus and began to think about, you know, who are our customers. But for probably a year, we were like, kind of blindly running around trying to sell the beer to everybody. I spent a lot of nights wondering, is this really going to work? It's just so hard to break through to a customer. We loved our customers so much, and we really, actually that was a good thing we did. We really focused on the places that supported us, and we realized that just selling beers, is one thing, but having customers, like people who relied on you and trusted you, that was really the key to it. And cultivating those people who supported us became, what we did. I knew every tap handle and every bottle placement in every retailer who we sold to in Brooklyn. If someone dropped one of our lines, I knew about it. If someone took in a competitor, I knew about it. And I was there trying to figure out what went wrong and how could we fix it. And I didn't do this in a cool, calm way. It was like freaking out kind of way. Like, oh shit, they took us off tap at, such and such tavern. Oh my God, what did I do wrong? How can we get back? Almost pleading with people. That was the way we kind of made our way. When I go out now and visit customers around Brooklyn, they always like to refer to, oh, Steve, you used to deliver the beer. How come you never come and deliver the beer anymore? I'm so happy I don't have to deliver the beer anymore. I measure success by the number of people between me and driving that truck.
Hey Steve, on that note, could you talk a little bit about Brooklyn's relationship with Craft Brewers Guild, how that came about, and why eventually you decided to dissolve that
Yeah. Yeah, he's talking about our distribution company. So we started out just selling Brooklyn Lager and delivering it and trying to collect the money, which was very difficult. We did, we opened a lot of accounts in Brooklyn, eventually in Manhattan. And suddenly we had other craft breweries and imports coming to us and saying, we're getting killed at Manhattan Beer. We're getting killed at Beehive. We're getting killed. We're getting nowhere in New York. Why don't you guys at Brooklyn sell our beer? So people like Merchant Duvan, I don't know if you know the Merchant Duvan, there's like Samuel Smith's and Iyer, and then Chimay and Duvel. All these fancy beers came to us and said, please sell our beer. And at that time, we had a warehouse probably about the size of this room. It was nowhere near the companies we were competing with, the big distributors in New York. But all these imported beers and other craft beers said, they're not selling anything through the big distributors. So you guys, Brooklyn, you know what this beer is all about. Sell our beer too. And we did it not because, actually we did love those beers and we knew all those beers. But we really did it because we we realized we couldn't make it with a distributorship with one product, just selling Brooklyn Lager. So that was why we broadened our portfolio. And once we did that, everyone came to us. I think you probably know we were the biggest distributor of Sierra Nevada outside of California. And but it really took away from our focus on the Brooklyn brand. And at a certain point, we realized the distributor is holding back the Brooklyn brand. The Brooklyn brand had a lot more legs than these other beers, and it was being stunted by being in this distributorship. And so that was when we made the decision to sell the distribution rights to the other distributors in New York and get out of that business. And actually, our sales of Brooklyn boomed after we did that. We were right that going through a distributor like Beehive or Manhattan Beer, we were ready for that. We were ready for the big leagues. And a lot of the brands that we distributed were not. So things really took off after we sold the distribution company. We also sold it we were about 1 million cases total annually. And Brooklyn was probably 400,000 of that or something like that. And we sold it for $12 a case, which brought in $12 million. And that was the first time we gave any return to our investors. That was a wonderful moment. Of course, I think about a couple of years ago when a similar distributor in Chicago, Windy City, sold for $70 a case. And I often think, damn, if we just held on for 15 more years, what could it have been? But of course, that's water under the dam.
It's a great question. I have 2 more questions. And of course, anyone else who wants to ask a question, because we have plenty of time until 3 o'clock. The company meetings at 3. And I prepared these questions a while ago, and you answered a pretty good bit of them already, but I'll go ahead and ask them anyway. We know that knowledge and skills are must-haves for success, but what about attitude? How did you change yours when things got challenging and scary? What did you do?
Well, fear is a wonderful motivator. The idea of failing just was not acceptable. We had taken money from colleagues and friends, people invested in this, and the idea of closing the door and telling everyone, sorry, I lost all your money. We just couldn't, I couldn't bear that, Tom couldn't bear that. So, we just worked our butts off day in, day out. And, I remember, I'd go out and say, okay, I'm going to work till like 6 o'clock today. And you get to 6 o'clock, and you haven't opened an account, and you're getting your face smashed in every place you walk into. Ed Raven, one of our early sales guys, Ed's I don't know, some of you probably know Ed. He's got a brew pub right around the corner over here now. Ed's about 6'10", and he's an animal. And Ed used to call himself Scarhead. That was his code name, Scarhead. For the amount of abuse that he took from customers. But coming to an end of a day like that, I would always push myself to go to that one extra account. And just on the chance that, that could be the one for that particular day. And often that worked out. Even if you knew it wasn't going to be a long-term customer, if they bought 5 cases from you, at the end of the day, it was like, oh yeah, you know, it wasn't a total loss. Even though, they'd be gone as a customer within a week or so. You take that extra risk, and you try to sell that extra case at the end of the long day. I remember there was one, my father, all dads are kind of hard to please, right? And my dad, he never understood journalism. He didn't get that at all. I remember when I got my first job at a newspaper, my dad said, "Great, so 6 years at Cornell University, and you're making $100 a week working for that asshole Don Hadley, the editor of the newspaper, who was kind of an asshole." That was sort of my dad's comment on my first 15 years working in newspapers. But he was thrilled when I told him I was going to start a brewery. And actually, he was the first one to invest. He wouldn't lend Alan and me money to buy an apartment when we came back from the Middle East. We had 2 children. And he said, no, you figure it out yourself. But when I told him I'm starting a brewery, he was the first one to invest 20. He and my wife never got along very well. But there was one point where I called him because I was really freaked out. I mean, we owed so much money, and we were really in a tight spot. So I called my dad and I said, "Dad, do you ever get to a point where you really have bit off more than you can chew, and you just feel like you're going to crack?" And he said, "Yeah." And there was like a pause. And he said, "Look, get back to work, will you?" Thanks a lot, Dad. Just the kind of wisdom I was hoping for.
That's awesome. My first job was, I think I made $9,200 a year. Like one of that was like, "Nice job. What do you want?" I was, "Well done." Healthcare? No. "Ah, nice job. Even better." That was pretty bad. Last question. What are the nuggets of learning that you'd like us to come away with, given what you've seen, especially as you think about where we are in the arc of the craft beer industry? What are the nuggets of learning that you'd like us to walk away with today that are both personal and professional that might be helpful to us as we move forward?
Well, I think it's still important to cultivate and take care of customers. It really is a relationship kind of business, I think. And I know you're working, through distributors now, and you don't always have that direct contact. But I think it's still important to have those direct relationships with customers. And by a customer, I mean someone who is going to be buying from you on a regular basis, hopefully forever. And those people are so important for any salesperson. And you can't spend too much of your time and your effort with good customers. You're always pushing out. You're trying to bring in more customers, but you gotta take care of those people who are really committed to you and taking care of you. And just the other day, someone called me, a woman who I've known for many years. She called and said, "Key Food, 7th Avenue, they're out of Brooklyn Lager." And it was like 2 days before Thanksgiving. So I emailed Patrick Donovan, and he said they're getting 26 cases tomorrow. And I don't know if he did that after I pointed it out, or if that was in the pipeline. I'm not going to ask him that. But, you know, you got to be in touch with the market, and that's where your credibility comes from, and that's why I think customers respect you when they know that you're looking out for them and that you know what's happening out there.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Talking about risks, obviously there's a goal, there's a reward again of sticking your neck out. As all of our communities become more beer aware and love beer, because we get to that point, that illumination where everyone loves beer. What do you hope the goal is that we've affected? Is it just the love of beer, or is there some other great impact we have on our communities?
Well, you mean what is the reward? What is the
of this big wheel we've all got our shoulders to?
Well, beer is part of our culture, a big part of our culture. And I think the desire for intoxication is a human drive. I think it's right there with your desire, your craving for food, your craving for sex, your craving for warmth, and the craving for intoxication, I think, is a natural drive. Obviously, some people get carried away with it, and it's not for everybody. But I think, by and large, beer has a positive impact on society and on people. And I feel that the impact that Brooklyn Brewery has had in Brooklyn and in this neighborhood is largely the result of the beauty of beer. We brought beer and some kind of local pride to this place, and we've become an important part of this community. And all the stuff Ben was talking about, we tried to build our marketing around that concept, sort of project the impact we've had here into the other markets where we're selling beer. And I'm very proud of what we've done here and the beers we make and the impact they've had on this community and others. And when you see people sitting here on Friday or Saturday, sitting around the table, meeting other people who they wouldn't otherwise meet, only because they're crammed into a picnic table having a beer together, I think that's a beautiful thing. And it addresses, it satisfies some human need. Notwithstanding, I was raised in the Baptist church in southeastern Ohio, where when my grandmother Baker came to visit, my mom and dad would hide all the booze because Grandma would have smashed the bottles. So I'm sure Grandma Baker is spinning in her grave somewhere, but she's wrong. Grandpa Baker appreciated a good beer. Grandma Baker was on the wrong track.
I think Chuck had a question.
To that same message, Steve, I know you're heavily involved with the VA. What is your take on the future of the quote-unquote long tail of the long tail?
The long tail.
As opposed to the 90s.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really a fascinating moment in the evolution of the craft beer movement, because what's happening right now, I feel like we're being hammered by the big mega brewers who have bought craft brands. So Heineken with Lagunitas, Constellation with Ballast Point, AB InBev with their 9 breweries. They have a lot of advantages that we don't, and I feel like we're suffering from out of stocks in retail customers, mostly in stores, because distributors are overwhelmed by the number of products that they've got, so they cut way back on the amount of beer they're ordering. And that results in that out of stocks, like the woman called me about 2 days before Thanksgiving. But the big brewers are pushing the distributors to take their brands, and they're not suffering the same way we are with the out of stocks. At the same time, you got this long tail. Actually, I just returned last night from San Antonio, a Brewers Association board meeting, and I said to Bob Pease, the CEO of the Brewers Association, I said, Bob, we're probably going to get to 5,000 breweries by the end of the year, right? And he said, no, we got to 5,000 breweries yesterday. There are now 5,005 breweries in America. And we're getting hammered by the big guys up here, and then from below you got these Lilliputians, the little guys coming up and playing the local card on us, and that's put a lot of heat on the top 50 craft breweries, and everyone's feeling it, I think. I'm hoping the BA is going to begin to work on some marketing efforts that are going to strengthen the craft segment against the big guys. I can't tell you anything more about that, but I'm really hoping that the Brewers Association is going to be helping us in that regard. And we're going to be helping ourselves too. They're going to give us the tools we need to address the issue of supporting small and independent breweries versus the big guys, craft breweries. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. Do you think that what's the future of the locals? I mean, do you think they're going to hang on, or
he's asking about the future of the locals, of the long tail. If you look at that bottle collection we have out front of the old Brooklyn breweries, most of those I have their volume listed. Many of them never got beyond like 1,000 barrels a year. And I think that's what's happening with this long tail, with all these small breweries. I don't know if they're not as ambitious as my generation of craft brewers were, or they're just in a different environment. But they don't have the ambition to grow to 300,000 barrels. They're happy to be 1,000 barrels or 2,000 barrels and make their money selling in their pub. Actually, there have been some statistics lately indicating that like as much as 10% of the craft beer sold in the U.S. is now being sold through tasting rooms by the thousands of breweries across the country. They're talking about the number being like 2 million barrels a year or something being sold through tasting rooms. And that's kind of like running a mom and pop business. And many of these small breweries, it is like a husband and wife operation, or maybe at most 3 people. And looking at that bottle collection, at the way things were in the 19th century, I have to think it's always been that way. There have always been dreamers who want to have a brewery, and they're happy for it just to be like a neighborhood brewery. So I don't think that's going to end. I think that's probably going to, well, there are 5,005 breweries now. There are 2,000 some in the works, developing. So I think, we're just going to have to learn to live with that. I think the way we differentiate ourselves is with the quality of the service that you bring to the table and the quality of the beer that we're selling, which, a lot of the smaller breweries the quality of their beer is really not up to snuff, but they're, the consumer, the beer drinker is willing to give them a break because they're, just small and cute and getting going. But I don't think that's going to last forever. So a lot depends on the work you do with the customers and the work that Garrett and our brewing team does with the quality of our beer. And the quality of our beer is way more sophisticated than it was 30 years ago when we started this. So. Yes?
Now, when you first started, you guys, collectively, all the originals were on the hook for your own money. You borrow it from friends and family and wherever else you can get it, where now there's so much, seems to be more state and federal, but monies for all these people. Do you think some people are content not getting bigger just because they're not on the hook for any of their own money anyways? Their tax breaks for some of their buildings and everything else, where it's just not costing them much to operate. When it comes time to pay, they'll walk away.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I do think it's a lot easier to start a brewery now than it was 30 years ago, because distributors are very eager to get their hands on any new brewery popping up in their territory, whereas 30 years ago the distributors wouldn't give us the time of day. They thought we were white men, which we weren't. We had to be. I think it is easier to get going in a lot of ways than ever before, and you can open up a tap room and get some cash flow and keep you going. For Brooklyn, the advantage we've created for ourselves is this international business that we have, which I believe is unique. None of our competitors, some of our, Sierra Nevada, Sam Adams, they've been exporting for as long as we have. But, I think thanks to the beauty of that name, Brooklyn, and the work that a lot of you have done, we've become a real international phenomenon. And that's a beautiful thing, and I think it can only support our efforts here domestically when people travel and see that Brooklyn is a player all around the world. And that's a very unique position to be in. And I know there are a lot of other craft brewers now who are feeling the crunch I was talking about and are now looking to export. But in most of the markets they get to, they find that Brooklyn is the big player and the one to go after, and they are having a tough time.
Do you think there's a point where people will say no? And who will those people be? Will distributors be the ones to say we're not taking any more brands? Will retailers say that's enough, my shelves are full? Is it consumers who say there's too much to keep track of out there now? Or even municipalities who say, we're making a ton of alcohol, which is still a bit of a vice in our town? Is there or is that something that we'll just kind of keep going past?
Well, I think you're seeing some of that happen already. I mean, I think most of you know that distributors are culling a lot of the slow-moving brands that they're dealing with now. So I think probably the most meaningful change is going to happen at the distribution level. Retailers, you know, they can always kind of lay it on the distributor, like take the shit back, you know, or whatever. So they have a way out of it. The distributors, I think, are the ones who are probably going to make those kind of decisions if they get made. But you know, everyone, I think everyone sees the new kid coming down the street and thinks, wow, you know, this could be the next Brooklyn, or this could be the next Sam Adams. So, you know, I don't think there's going to be a day when, you know, they cast thousands of small breweries out the door. But, you know, it'll probably happen for a while, and then it'll stop, and then they'll take on more, and then they'll throw some out. And I don't think there's going to be a day of reckoning like that. We're just kind of struggling along.
What do you think are the key success factors for us in Texas? You mentioned the name Brooklyn, but other than that, what do you think made us so successful?
Question is, what are the key success factors internationally? You know, I think I think Garrett is an incredible asset for the brewery. He's such a charismatic speaker and such a great character in the industry, and you know, he's an incredible ambassador for us. We all loved Michael Jackson, the British beer writer who wrote The World Guide to Beer and a bunch of other great books. We had Michael here many times over the years helping us promote our brands and all the brands we distributed back then. And of course, you know, Michael was also the world's authority on whiskey as well as beer, and unfortunately he drank way too much of the whiskey, so he didn't live as long as he should have. But at his funeral, Garrett was the only American to speak, and he gave an incredibly moving eulogy for Michael. And I felt like the mantle of world's beer authority kind of went from Michael onto Garrett's shoulders at that time. And I think he's done an incredible job carrying that mantle, you know, with the Brewmaster's Table and with the Oxford Companion to Beer. So I think, you know, no other brewery has Garrett Oliver. And I think our story is a strong one too. And a big part of building the Brooklyn brand has been the stories behind the company, and you know, being able to tell those stories and share them with people, because all that stuff really matters to people. It's funny, sometimes happens to me when I'm pouring beer at a beer festival or something. People will come up and say, you know, I know the guy who started this thing. And I say, oh, no kidding. Which one? And they say, you know, the journalist guy. And I say, oh, no shit. You know, what's he like? And, you know, they'll tell you the whole story, and it's kind of cool that the story's out there. I think another unique thing about Brooklyn Brewery is the books we've written, and I've written, and Garrett's written. Those are incredibly influential. You know, it's hard to sell beer, I know that. But damn, if you get someone to read your book, you know, that's hook, line, and sinker. Right? And I run into people all the time who have read, you know, beer school, and that's a very unique kind of relationship with your customer. If they know your story and they like to tell it to people. So I think we have a lot of advantages, which are mainly human advantages. It seems to me, we always said in the beginning that people sell beer. People make the market with craft beer. I think with the big guys, it's media. When you read about them, what they're doing in the trade press, so much depends on the new ad firm they signed up and the new ads they're doing that they show to their distributors. And craft beer is not like that. I mean, craft beer is really, to me, it's like the real beer business. It's like the original beer business. It's a people kind of business, and relationships are so important. And I think, having this amazing number of ambassadors and people working for Brooklyn domestically and around the world is an incredible asset. And you're all critical ambassadors and personalities representing Brooklyn and Brooklyn Lager and our brands. And I hope you're proud of that. And I think, it took a lot of chutzpah, it took a lot of guts to go out there and sell this thing from the beginning. And I know it still does, but you gotta understand, we appreciate it when you go that extra step and take that extra risk and knock on that door, even if it doesn't look like a likely customer. You never know who's going to buy your beer. I'm sometimes very surprised at the places that that get behind Brooklyn, and it's such a relief when you run into someone who's really committed to what you're doing, as opposed to the people who are trying to get their hands in your pocket. There are plenty of those. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about why lager, and perhaps what about the recipe?
Why lager? Why it's still...
No, why now you chose that as your first
Oh,
brand?
well, that's easy because we wanted to connect to the history of brewing in Brooklyn. And the history of brewing in Brooklyn is really mostly about lager beer. There were so many German immigrants, like in the 1830s, 1840s, who came to Brooklyn, and they started making lager beer, and it really eclipsed the English-style ales, which were being sold before that, porter and pale ale. So when we started, we wanted to connect to that lager brewing tradition in Brooklyn. And, Bill Moeller, the original brewmaster, fourth generation German-American brewer, his grandfather had brewed in Brooklyn. So we used Bill's grandpa's notebooks to look at the old lager recipes. And then, we tweaked them quite a bit. I mean, we did some things that they weren't doing back in the day, like dry hopping, putting those extra hops in when they're in the conditioning tanks to get that nice aroma to the beer. And the lager, Brooklyn lager is probably more bitter than a lot of the lager beers that were made back in the day. But it's really based on the beers that were popular in New York. And it's quite amazing that lager is still growing. A lot of flagships like Boston Lager and Sierra Nevada have had some trouble with their growth, and New Belgium, Fat Tire. But our brand lager just keeps chugging along, and it's become a real factor internationally. But you know, that's one thing. I'm still thrilled that it's growing in New York City. And I think that's a testament to the appeal of that particular beer. You know, it's funny, when we started, so many people spit it out. You know, they said, shit, you know, why don't you make a beer like Heineken or Bud? This shit is too dark, you know, bitter. And now it's considered like an entry-level beer, you know, like a beginner beer. You know, no one bats an eye in tasting Brooklyn Lager. So the market has really come a long way in the last 30 years. I'm glad we make Brooklyn Lager.
Let's do like maybe 2 more questions.
Steve, how do you foresee the future of imports in this country? Consolidations and American habits changed so much over the last 25 years?
Yeah, he's asking about imported beer. Yeah, it's interesting. So when we started in '88, imports were like 2% of the U.S. market. Actually, very similar to the situation now in Japan, where imports and craft are less than 2%. Imports have grown incredibly here in America. They're actually now like 15 or 16%. And craft beer, if you count not only independent breweries, but also the beers craft brands that have been bought by the big guys, craft beer is probably around 15, 16% also. So, you know, together, imports and craft beer are like more than 30% of the U.S. market, which is astounding. Now, interesting thing about imported beer, much of imported beer is, you know, Corona and Heineken. And Corona is not that much different than Budweiser when it comes to the weight. I know it's got a different, you know, it's got a better flavor, but it's really light lager beers. So the imports have become much bigger, but they're really kind of making the same beer as the big domestic breweries. Craft beer has really changed the American palate and the American beer business, because craft beer is really still all about flavor. And, you know, we can be very proud of that, because if you look at the history of beer in America, the biggest innovation of, say, the last 100 years is light beer. And interestingly, you know, light beer was developed here in Brooklyn by a guy named Joe Waites, who just passed away a few years ago. We knew a brewmaster. He made a beer at the Rheingold Brewery in Brooklyn. What was the name of it? Gabliners. Horrible name. And it was called a diet beer, and it totally bombed. And it really wasn't until Miller Lite that light beer took off. But you know, light beer is bigger than premium lager in the U.S. So light beer is the biggest change, but it's still, you know, it's still light lager beer. Other innovations have happened, like malt liquor, flavored malt beverages, nitro beer. All those things were really created by the mega brewers. And once one of them had a little success with something, like dry beer actually began in Japan with the Asahi brewery. And once they started selling a lot of it, brewers all over the world copied that dry beer. Craft beer is different than all those innovations. Craft beer was not started by the mega brewers. It was started by people like me. It was started by mostly home brewers who got into craft brewing. And I think that's why there's so much, we have so much faith in independence matters. Because I think if this gets left to the mega brewers, they're going to, they're going to eventually come to the lowest common denominator, whether it's like IPA or whatever. They're going to want to put this in a box and make it create giant brands with one style. And the beauty of the independent brewers is the innovation that happens and the creativity. And that's why a lot of us are so passionate about supporting independent small brewers. And I'm hoping the Brewers Association is going to be launching, an effort to support that more strongly in the marketplace in the U.S.
Might be a little lighter question, but obviously the huge thing now, at least in New England, especially because you can hit so many places in the Northeast, is beer tourism and having the experience going to the brewery and everything like that. Do you have a favorite beer experience or like a standout, situation where it was like, I don't know, something along those lines?
Well, Garrett and I had the privilege of touring around Europe when we were representing all these great beers in Belgium and Germany and the UK. And wow, it was so much fun visiting, Duvel and visiting Chimay and visiting Paulaner and Ackershore and Augustiner. And not just visiting as like a tourist, but as a brewer, and being welcomed into their brew houses and talking with the brewers. And I think being able to share that kind of experience with our customers who come to visit Brooklyn Brewery, I think is a wonderful thing and a very powerful part of our business. Ben was talking about the beer school. I think that's the single best way you can cement your relationship with good customers is to bring them here to the brewery. And our team here, Dave and Lauren and Aaron and all the people who do the tours, they're incredible. I mean, they bring so much passion and excitement, and occasionally a little bit of bullshit to the stories they tell.
I resent that.
People take that. That's why people flock here on the weekends. So I think beer tourism has a long way to go, and having this new beer garden on the roof in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I think is going to be an incredible advantage for Brooklyn Brewery and a great part of our future.
Thanks, Steve. I think we're right. We're getting close to 3 o'clock. Chris will take us home in a second, and then we'll roll into Eric and the company meeting. But I, for one, just want to say thank you.